Have you ever stopped to think that maybe what's holding you up today is the very thing keeping you from moving forward? It sounds contradictory, I know, but what if that thing you guard so fiercely, value so deeply, defend with everything you've got, is actually the reason you're stuck in the same place? Some things we call security are in reality just invisible chains. And the most curious part? We don't even realize it. That comfortable routine, the stable job that no longer inspires, the lukewarm relationship that doesn't hurt but doesn't help you bloom either. That habit you repeat every single day just because it's always been that way. But is that a shelter or a prison? What would happen if all of a sudden that foundation disappeared? Would it be the end or the beginning of something greater? It might sound scary, but today you're going to hear a simple yet deeply transformative story that will turn this question upside down. Because sometimes losing what we thought was essential is the very first step to discovering who we truly are. Let me tell you a story. It's not about famous heroes or big achievements that make headlines. It's one of those quiet stories, the kind that unfolds far from the spotlight, yet carries a power strong enough to completely change the way we see life. It's a story about courage, but not the loud kind, not the kind that waves flags or delivers fiery speeches. It's the kind of courage that lets go, that chooses to release, that dares to give up something that once felt essential. And it's in that very moment, when everything seems to fall apart, that true transformation begins. But here's the thing, this story doesn't start with a happy ending. It begins with poverty, with scarcity, and a difficult choice. So if you've ever wondered why certain losses feel so unfair, or if you've ever had to let go of something before you felt ready, then this story is for you. Shall we begin? It was late afternoon when the master and his young disciple, exhausted from a long journey, spotted a small, lonely house perched atop a hill. The path leading there was barren and silent, as if time had stopped in that forgotten landscape. The house was simple, almost fragile. Weathered walls, a crooked roof, and in the yard, signs of a life sustained by very little. They were welcomed by a humble family, a father, a mother, 2 small children, and a grandmother with a serene gaze and hands etched by time. Inside that home, there was no luxury, no abundance. But there was something that kept them going, something that fed their hope and provided just enough to get by. An old sewing machine, passed down through generations. With it, the family made simple clothes to sell in the nearby village. The earnings were modest, but enough to buy rice, beans, and blankets for the cold days. To them, that sewing machine wasn't just an object. It was the heart of the home, a symbol of survival. And there, amidst weary eyes and soft voices, a quiet question began to form. One only time could answer. Because sometimes, what feels like a foundation might also be a ceiling. That night, the disciple could barely sleep. He could hear the sound of the sewing machine's pedal echoing through the quiet house, stitching hope together, one thread at a time. Each movement of the needle felt like a silent prayer for better days. His chest tightened with a mix of admiration and compassion. How was it possible that, with so little, that family held on to so much dignity? As the sun rose, while they were still sipping weak coffee from chipped mugs, the disciple gently pulled the master aside and whispered, "Master, isn't there something we can do for them?" The old sage locked eyes with the young man for a moment that felt far too long. Then, in a calm but unwavering voice, he replied, "Yes, there is." The disciple's face lit up, expecting a response that involved help, maybe food, maybe even gold coins. But the master continued, "Go back there and break the sewing machine." Silence. The disciple's eyes widened. He thought he'd heard wrong. "Master, that's all they have. It's their livelihood." Exactly. The disciple's heart sank like a stone. He tried to argue, he begged, he cried. But there was a spark in the master's eyes that said, "Trust me." With trembling hands and a soul torn in two, he entered the empty house. The family had gone out to fetch water. He walked up to the old machine, touched the cold metal, took a deep breath, and with a single blow, destroyed the very thing that had kept that life afloat. When it was done, he couldn't bear to stay. He walked down the hill carrying a guilt that would stay with him for years. But life had bigger plans. Time passed. The seasons changed. The disciple grew. He became a man. But inside him, that old pain never faded. The image of that house, the sound of the machine breaking, the faces of the family he never saw again. For years he carried that guilt like an invisible burden. No matter how much he learned, no matter how far he advanced on his spiritual path, something inside him remained unresolved. Until one day, driven by a force stronger than fear, he made a decision to go back. He needed to ask for forgiveness. He needed to look that family in the eye and say, "I'm sorry for taking away the one thing that kept you going." He climbed the hill once more, now steeper. Or maybe it was just the weight of memory that made each step feel heavier. But when he reached the top, he froze. He blinked several times, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Where once stood a fragile little home, there was now a beautiful brick house with wide windows, a blooming porch, a brand new roof. In the yard, laughter, children playing, adults smiling, brightly colored clothes drying in the sun. It was the same family, but transformed. The disciple couldn't make sense of it. How? How could something so painful have led to such abundance? And it was there, standing in front of that new reality, that he would uncover a truth that would forever change the way he saw life. The woman who greeted him at the door had the same serene gaze as before, but now it carried the strength of someone who had conquered invisible battles. When the disciple, overwhelmed with emotion, began to apologize, she simply smiled. "We remember you," she said gently, and for a long time, we thought that moment had been a curse. She invited him inside. The house, now filled with color, aromas and stories, seemed to breathe a new kind of energy. As she poured a cup of fresh tea, she continued, "When we lost the sewing machine, it felt like the ground had crumbled beneath us. We cried. We panicked. We spent days not knowing what to do. It was awful. But then, something shifted. Her husband learned to work with wood and became a carpenter. Her daughter discovered a rare gift for embroidery and began selling her delicate creations. The grandmother, with her deep knowledge of herbs, started making medicinal teas for the community. Even the youngest son helped by delivering orders. And little by little, she said, her eyes welling with tears, we realized that loss was what pushed us to discover everything we already had inside, but had forgotten. The disciple, now silent, understood. The destruction of the machine hadn't been the end, it was the beginning. That afternoon, the disciple walked down the hill in silence. The woman's words still echoed in his mind, but what weighed on him, or maybe now set him free, was the clarity of what it all truly meant. That sewing machine was never just a machine. It was a living metaphor, a symbol of the comfort zone, something that, at first glance, seemed essential, irreplaceable. But deep down, it was limiting, holding them back, keeping them confined. Yes, it offered security, but it also bred complacency. And like so many things in life, what holds us up today might be the very thing keeping us from taking flight tomorrow. How many times do we cling to what's familiar simply because we're afraid of what lies beyond? How often do we call stability what is, in truth, stagnation? That family only discovered their true talents, their many hidden gifts, when they were forced to look beyond what they already knew. The loss, as cruel as it may have seemed, was life's push to awaken something greater. Because here's the truth, sometimes what feels like the end of the world is actually the beginning of a whole new story. And now, the question that remains is this: what is your sewing machine? What are you protecting out of fear of losing? That might actually be the very thing limiting your growth. Are you holding on to a job that no longer makes sense, but feels safe? To a routine that no longer inspires you, but you keep repeating out of habit? To an old idea of who you are that no longer fits the person you're becoming? Sometimes, life tries to whisper. Other times, it shouts. And in certain moments, It simply removes something from our path, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom, because as long as you're clinging to what's familiar, your hands won't be free to grasp the new life that's trying to take shape. So, with courage and honesty, ask yourself, what do I need to let go of in order to grow? What's giving me comfort, but keeping me from blooming? We won't always have all the answers, but being willing to ask the right questions is already a powerful beginning. Maybe you don't know what the next step looks like just yet. Maybe you're scared to leave behind what you know, and that's okay. The path of growth is rarely comfortable, but it's always real, because every ending, no matter how painful, unexpected, or unfair it may seem, carries within it the seed of a new beginning. That family only blossomed when they were forced to seek light elsewhere. And maybe the same is about to happen to you. Don't fear the losses. Don't curse the fresh starts. They're often the hidden forms of your greatest blessings. Trust the process. Life knows exactly what it's doing, even when you don't yet understand. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize that what once felt like the end was actually the very moment your true story began.